I see some editing mistakes all the time on Instagram or whatever. And even professional photographers, I see they do these mistakes as well in their edits sometimes. And I see those mistakes, I have done most of them, oh, all of them myself. So I decided to make this video to address those, and hopefully you will learn something and you won't do the same mistakes in your editings from now on. Let's right away start with the first mistake. And the first mistake is a little bit more common. I see it all the time. Yeah, it's a not unknown mistake. Sometimes when you take a photo, you stick with the aspect ratio of your camera sensor and you think that you don't want to crop it because you're gonna lose those megapixels. But it's not a right way of thinking about cropping. The crop is a very good and a very powerful tool in your disposal to make your photo more impactful. And sometimes we are attached to the what we got in the photo, and we think that we want to include all of those details in the photo, but they are not adding that much to the image. Let's have a look at this image. On this panorama I took in Norway, I really like this photo, and I actually printed it out as it is, and it's hanging on my wall somewhere in the house. But when I look at this image, I realized that I am included so much into the same frame that I don't really need. The first thing that bothered me quite a bit is this bottom part of the frame, the snowy foreground. So if I crop it out, I have a little bit cleaner image and easier to look at image because of all those foreground that it's messy and it doesn't add to the image. And now we have end up with a very long and narrow panorama which doesn't fit on any screen or any print or anything. And to be honest, we can make actually 2-3 image out of this photo. So if I crop again, let's say if I crop this side of image, on its own it's a very beautiful image. It has all the ingredients, and if we go on the other side, I think this image is actually very powerful. It's conveyed the feeling that I wanted to capture from that scene. I have the bird, I have this beautiful light on the side of the mountain, I have the glow coming through the image from the left side of the image, and everything is there. The mood, the light, everything. The other mistake I see sometimes is the horizon line is not correct. And right now I see that this is a little bit tilted in this photo as well, and it's easy to fix with the crop tool. Let's have a look at another example here. I think I do have everything, is nothing wrong with it, but we can crop it a little bit more, and probably we don't need the wave in the foreground, and we can just focus on what is most important in the photo. The shape of this mountain that looks like a sleeping lion. I think that actually makes it a little bit more impactful when I crop it a little bit more. So it was a subtle change in this photo. If I compare it to what it was before, it's not that much of difference, but I think this is adding to the image. It makes it a little bit more powerful. So maybe this mistake wasn't that much of mystery for anyone. We all know that, but we miss it all the time as well. As you can see, I missed it in those two pictures. When I edit those two images, I was so loved everything to keep in the image that I actually end up with the version that I felt that it's not as good. I have one more example to show you here. When I took this image, I also was so impressed by the whole scene. I wanted to include everything. And now when I look at this image, I feel that I could have done a better job when I frame this photo. But it's not too late. We can crop out some of the distraction that we don't need to have. One of them is actually the sun. It's diffused, it's bright, it has some glow on the top of the image, but actually that takes a lot of attention in the photo. If I crop it out, it's a little bit more about the landscape itself. And now we can look at what matters. But again, when I look at this crop, I feel that this side can be actually be a little bit distracting. The point of this photo was me standing on this rock looking at this kind of natural bridge created by clouds over this water or ocean. So if I crop that part out from the left, now everything we have left off is what is really important in this photo. And I think this photo now has more impact and it's more interesting to look at, because now we can see the person a little bit bigger, and also the focus immediately goes to this beautiful clouds that's bridging between these two islands. And also it feels that you don't know what's going on the both sides of these borders of the frame. These islands can continue forever. You don't know what it is. It's a little bit more mysterious as well. Now to the next mistake I see. Not everyone talks about it much. And that's about the colors. Some pictures that they have so many colors in the photo. There is no relationship between the colors. There is no simplicity in the color palette. And I think that's a very big mistake. Let me show you some examples. First, let's have a good example. In this photo, I have only two major colors, purple and greens. And they are sitting against each other on the opposite side of the color wheel. It's called complementary colors in color theory. So this image is simple in terms of the colors. Now let me show you another example. It's a very beautiful scene and I really like the composition. Everything about this photo I adore. And it's a raw file. I just did some quick tweaks to the highlights and shadows and a little bit of curve, and of course, yes, the white balance I adjust because it was too blue. It's already make the image a bit more interesting, but something is off in this photo, and that's the colors. You see, this photo is about autumn colors, but the autumn feeling is lost in this image. The main issue here is that the yellowish leaves are a bit greenish, especially in the background, and the greens are a little bit overpowering. Now you see my final edit, I toned down the greens quite a lot and add a little bit of saturation and brightness to the yellowish colors. That makes a huge difference in this photo. If you look at these two images side by side, you can see the difference. Everything is there, everything is the same, except the colors are a little bit more harmonized in the image on the right. The point here is about the colors and how you can make the image a little bit more simple, a little bit more interesting to look at by minimizing the color palette and harmonizing the colors in the photo. Actually, I made a video a while ago about colors, color theory, and the secret weapon in Capture One that you can use to create harmonized colors. Check that video after this one. Let's continue with the editing mistakes. One part of the color mistakes I see in some images is to have too much saturation or too less saturation. You see, too much saturation might hurt the image, and also lack of saturation that also can hurt the image a little bit. Unless you go black and white, of course, then you have to reduce the saturation all the way to 0. Let's jump back to this image for instance. If someone increased the saturation, it becomes like this, and I see photos like that a lot, especially on Instagram. If you want to have a little bit more impactful colors, the best way to do it is just select the color that you need to increase saturation on and leave the rest of the colors alone. If you do it like this globally, everything becomes so saturated. The blues are become a little bit ugly now. So let's disable this saturation, and instead I'll select those yellowish colors that probably we want to increase saturation on. Select a bigger range of the colors and increase the saturation, but not too crazy though. I'm not gonna go all the way like this. That becomes a little bit ridiculously saturated on the red. So let's take it down a little bit. I'm adding quite a bit of saturation now. It's more impactful, more beautiful, but we don't need to push the saturation all the way to the right. In the same time, don't afraid to push the saturation too. When I started photography, what I learned was that don't push the saturation more than 10% or something like that. But you see here, it's okay if the image needs a little bit saturation in one color. There is no problem on pushing saturation beyond those low numbers. The key point here is to keep the image natural. Here's another example of having too much saturation in a photo. When I look at this image, I feel that I have too much colors in this image, which make it a little bit unrealistic. So if I create a new layer, and in that layer I'm gonna select the blue colors. Let's expand the range of the colors we are affecting and reduce the saturation of the blue colors. Maybe I change the hue just a tad to have them bit less purple. Maybe I increase the brightness of the blue colors as well to add more depth. With this simple color tweak, I added more depth to the image. I add more realism to the image. And I think this image works a little bit better now. Contrast is the next mistake I see people do all the time, and I am guilty of that as well. It depends on the needs of the image that you have to add or reduce contrast. You cannot increase contrast on every image except to get a beautiful result or reduce it a lot. I've seen some nice pictures of big vistas from professional photographers. They lack contrast and therefore the image lacks impact. And on the other hand, I see a lot of pictures that have been boosted contrast quite a lot and it's not pleasant to look at anymore. Same as like when we increase the saturation here. So let's have a look at some examples. I pushed the contrast quite a bit on this photo. And in the same time, I push the saturation as well, because you see all those details, all those colors are in the raw file, but I just boost them out. I just brought them out of this image. And because this is an abstract photo, it's actually helping the image. It doesn't destroy the image. So it make it more abstract, it gives more room for imagination what it is that we are looking at. It might be outer space, nebula or something. It gives us more room for exploration on this photo. Or this image, different part of the same scene. I see a creature in this photo. Another example, a good example of that is this image. It's a hiking image, it's very nice. Again, nothing wrong with this one. But what if I increase the contrast a lot on this image? Suddenly we end up with the image that is more moody, it's more impactful, it's more interesting. All I have done here is to boost up the contrast in certain part of the image with some luminosity masking and darkening down some part of it, brightening up some part of it, which is one way of adding contrast. It's not like globally applying contrast all over the photo. On the other hand, some photos they don't need so much contrast, like this one here. If I boost up the contrast here, let's do it globally, I'm using the shortcut to do that. Yes, it might be a little bit more impactful in foregrounds, you might like it more, but this image for me was about the softness of the fog. And if I boost the contrast, I lose that softness. Another mistake that I see often happens in some pictures is to use not enough clarity or sometimes too much clarity. Let's have a look at this image, for instance. This is again edited photo, and if I look at this image, I don't see those branches of the background trees too clearly. And the way I did that is to reduce the contrast, reduce the clarity on those branches. If I add clarity to this image, let's see what's gonna happen. Suddenly we see so much of those background branches and the image becomes a little bit chaotic and cluttered. This is not what I was after for this photo. I wanted to focus more on the foreground tree and the main branches and main trunks, but reduce the attention towards the background. So to do that, I need to reduce the clarity. But if I want to add some clarity to main subject here, I can do it locally. So the best way to do that is actually to create a mask. Let's say I will create a mask for the tree, add the clarity to those part of the image that needs some clarity. Clarity is more like a local contrast, something like sharpening but in a bigger scale. So by doing that with this layer, you can see that we added somewhat clarity to the main subject without adding too much clarity to the background. One mistake I see some people do, I am guilty of that as well, is actually not an editing mistake, but it's more of a behavior of taking pictures and collecting them. We don't pay enough attention to each image. We don't pay each image the time it deserves to edit it. Some people become just a collector of the photos. They take pictures and they store them in the hard drive without even touching them in the editing software. I always edit my photos, but sometimes when I have like too many photos of the same trip, I start with editing some of them that I am excited about, and then I get tired, and then I lose interest in editing the rest of the images. And sometimes later I found out that I have some good images in that collection that I haven't even edited them. And this behavior is not super healthy for your photography, because when you forget about the images, you take images, you don't edit them, you don't learn from them. If you have, when taking the photos, or if the composition is not great, or even if the composition is good, it just needs a little bit of extra work in the edit to make it perfect, and just store it in some sort of storage. You don't practice enough of editing, and you lose the opportunity of having a very nice photo in your portfolio. Perhaps I have done this mistake as well. When I was preparing for this video to record, I went through my archive and I found some images that I didn't even consider them to be a good images, or I didn't actually touch them in edit at all. So one of them is this one. Let me show you. I just found this photo in my archive and I thought, this is a nice photo. Why I didn't edit it at all? Here's the raw file without any editing, straight out of the camera. I just edited a little bit with adding some contrast and make a black and white photo of it. The reason maybe I didn't pay attention to this photo is because I already had this one, which I really loved, and I thought, yes, this is a better photo. Of course, I like this much more. It has more depth and there is more mood in this photo. But nevertheless, the image on the right is also a good photo. And same goes for this one. I just edit this one. I remember when I was there taking these photos, I was in a very bad mood. I didn't feel that my photography is improving. I felt that I'm missing the opportunity to take good pictures here. But after a while, when those feelings faded away, now I look at these photos and I see potential here, and I can edit them to make something a little bit more interesting out of those less impressive photos. The last but not least, final mistake I see sometimes people do is forcing an same edit on all the images. Remember, each image needs its own edit. Each image has different feeling, different mood, different story to tell. So therefore, it needs its own edit. So if I edit an image that needs to be moody, edit it very flat and high key, it loses its purpose. If I edit a photo that is meant to be soft and happy and dreamy in a way that it has so much contrast, so much colors, I will ruin the mood and I will ruin the feeling of the photo. But it also depends on what you want with the image. So because sometimes an image has potential of going both ways. It can be moody, it can be dreamy, and it's up to you as an artist to decide which way you want to go, which of these feelings you want to convey with your photo. If you so far enjoyed this video and you want to learn a little bit more about editing in Capture One, I have a playlist that you can watch. Please, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much for watching this video. Until next video, take care. Bye.